I think it's important that as Christians that we celebrate the wins when we see them. And this is a moment that not only am I ecstatic that Hamlin has been released from the hospital and seems to be on a road to recovery, which I'm sure is going to be a process for him. I'm glad that he's with us and that he's making that journey. I'm also glad to see that there are people who understand the power of prayer. I mean, all of a sudden, national news, and ESPN and these different channels, we saw people praying. We saw athletes taking a knee to pray rather than to protest. And I think that's awesome. I think that people know in their heart, it's kind of the old adage that there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole. And here we had sort of a metaphorical foxhole for the teammates teammate of these players, and really, somebody who's beloved by America. And all of a sudden, for one day, America sort of stopped and realized that prayer matters.
That prayer matters. It matters a lot when somebody is, out on the football field, unable to get up. They didn't know if he was alive at that point. And so I got to ask you this, Lucas. I mean, you're out there. And the point that we just made here in the opening was, are we led to believe through social media, which is heavily influenced by the Chinese Communist Party and others that have lots of money pumping it into all these social media platforms, are we led to believe falsely that the belief in God and faith continues to get lower and lower and lower? Is that the narrative? Is it making it lower? Or is that the narrative they're pushing to create it lower? Are there more people that are religious that like the prayers like we just saw on ESPN? What's the truth of the matter, do you believe?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that you could point to somebody like George Soros' theory on reflexivity, and it's basically, used on an economic standpoint to start with, but he also talks about it when it comes to morals, and that is if you say something essentially enough, people will start believing it. And that's really kind of the boiled down version of that theory. And I think that's the tactic that the left has used. Is they've just tried to, kind of downplay the religious and faith aspect to the American people. But when push comes to shove, I think we're seeing that there are a lot of people that recognize the power of prayer. I'd like to hear more people, saying that, look, this was an answer to prayer. It's not just important to pray when it's happening. It's also important to, to give thanks and praise when we see an answer to prayer, when we see, Hamlin get out of the hospital and be able to be discharged. That's an answer to prayer. That's something we need to celebrate. So I have hope for the American people. Look, there's a lot of people that hate the Lord. They hate Christ. They hate God. They hate the Holy Spirit. They hate church. They hate anything that, stands for that. But I believe that there is still a great majority in this country that believes in God, that sees the value in prayer and sees the value in Christian values, and do not want these values to be torn out of society as the left is attempting to do.